I'm going to take you straight to Capitol Hill. We're going to listen into the chairman of the House Intel Committee speaking about their investigation into the Russian hacks.
But I'm just looking forward to taking your questions. So with that, I'll just open it up to all of you.
Mr. Nunes, can you say categorically that there were no contacts whatsoever between any officials affiliated with the Russian government and the Trump campaign?
Yeah, not that I'm aware of. We still have not seen any evidence of anyone that from the Trump campaign or any other campaign for that matter that's communicated with the Russian government.
And also, why would you agree to talk to reporters at the behest of the White House, knowing that you're still looking into this matter?
Yeah, so that story was a little odd, I thought, because if you asked me to contact the White House and said, hey, could you set me up with somebody at DOD or the intelligence agencies, I would say sure. So it was kind of an odd story, I thought.
Is it compromised in any way? Is the fact that you have already made this determination?
How is it compromised if I'm trying to be transparent with the press, and if the White House asks me to talk to a reporter, which, by the way, it was one reporter, I don't know. If the White House asked me to talk to you, would you think that that would be okay or not okay?
Well, what's your response to that?
Cool. What's your response to it?
Well, you're investigating this matter, and the White House is urging you to knock down these stories that are raising questions about this.
No, that absolutely didn't happen.
Is there anything that you've learned? Is there anything that you have learned in the course of this investigation that really conflicts with the public reporting?
Well, if you look at what's happened, there's been major crimes have been committed, and what I'm concerned about is this. No one is focusing on major leaks that have occurred here, and so, right after the leak of the transcript that President Trump had with the Australian with the Australian Prime Minister. I was in contact with the Australian ambassador. I was also in contact with the White House and the appropriate agencies because we can't run a government like this. A government can't function with massive leaks at the highest level of our president talking to foreign leaders. And so that, I think, is one of the focuses that you all should be concerned about, because these are high-level leaks.
How big is the circle of individuals who have access to those transcripts?
Well, this is out of, I didn't really realize this, but evidently the way I understand the process is that the last administration had it set up to go down to the State Department and the IC, and perhaps any other stakeholders within the NSC or the appropriate people within the White House. And so, we don't know how those got out, but clearly, how are foreign leaders going to be able to talk to our president if they don't think that this is going to be leaked to the press?
Congressman, on Russian government, just to follow on Mana's question, because you said no contacts with the Russian government. As I'm sure you're aware, there are many Russian businessmen, oligarchs, etc., that report back to the Kremlin. That's part of their circle of intelligence gathering. Have you eliminated that possibility that the people that Trump advisors were speaking with have connections to the Russian government, even if they're not officially working for the Russian government?
Well, we haven't, just to be clear, we haven't eliminated anything. The only thing that I want to make sure that we do is before we go after American citizens and subpoena them or bring them before the legislative branch of government, that it's not just because they appeared in a news story somewhere.
But you're saying, you're still investigating then communications between Trump campaign advisors and Russians known to U.S. intelligence perhaps who might be reporting back to the Kremlin?
It's not, I wouldn't limit it to Trump only or Trump officials. I would say that it would be also any contacts with any political candidates anywhere at any level, including in the United States or in other foreign countries.
Are you saying then that there were Clinton advisors that were speaking to Trump?
I'm just saying that, no, let's not.
Well, I'm just asking what you're saying.
There would be no evidence of that, nor is there any evidence that I've been presented about Trump advisors speaking to Russians. But we do know for a long time that the Russians have been very interested in manipulating elections, manipulating the press. They're very good at propaganda. And so, that's what caused me a year ago to come out and criticize the intelligence agencies for the largest intelligence failure since 9/11 because of the lack of good intelligence that we were getting on Putin's plans and intentions. And so that's why I really appreciate the amount of press that showed up here today because, you know, we do need to have some scrutiny put onto the Russian government, and we do need to know if there are any Americans that are talking to the Russians and anybody connected to the Russian government or Russian agents. But at this time, I want to be very careful that we can't just go on a witch hunt against Americans because they appear in a news story somewhere.
And by Americans, do you mean Michael Flynn, the former NSA?
Any American. Yeah, any American.
Are you referring obliquely to Flynn?
Well, I think specifically there was, I think the more important question on that was there were 3 Americans, of which the only name I know is Manafort. The other 2 I don't know, but they appeared in a news story. And the questions that we had 10 days ago when that story broke, for many of you who attended the different press availabilities that I had, the question was whether or not we were going to investigate those Americans. And at this point, here at the committee, we still don't have any evidence of them talking to Russians.
And do you have all the evidence at this point that you expect to receive, or would you say you're still in the preliminary stages of receiving and reviewing that evidence?
Well, we're working on we have the scoping of our investigation finished, and then we're going to move into actually receiving the evidence. But as of right now, the initial inquiries I've made to the appropriate agencies, I don't have any evidence.
I just want to be really clear here. So the FBI specifically told you that they have found no contacts between any Trump associates and Russian officials.
Yeah, so I want to be, we're not going to just, we're going to say the whole IC here. I'm not going to get it to specific to any one agency. But as of right now, I don't have any evidence that would, of any phone calls. It doesn't mean they don't exist, but I don't have that. And what I've been told is by many folks is that there's nothing there.
But you're still looking into it.
But we're absolutely looking into it, and we want the information. But I just can't call in American citizens with no information.
When you say there are no contacts with Russians, are you referring to direct contacts? For instance, Mr. Manafort had a lot of contacts with Ukrainians and people who work closely with the Russian government.
Yeah, well, I think specifically this would be on contacts with any association whatsoever to anyone even within the realm of the Russian intelligence apparatus.
You just said that many people have told you this. Can you be more specific? I mean, who has told you that there are?
No, I'm not going to get into specifically the conversations I had. I had with the executive branch and the appropriate agencies. But I will say that we long have had a very good process in the Congress here, where we have the Gang of Eight. When counterintelligence issues arise, they brief us on those counterintelligence issues, and we keep them because they oftentimes involve American citizens, and it's important that we keep it that way when those investigations are ongoing. But in this case, as it relates to any campaign officials dealing with Russians, we don't have any evidence right now.
Mr. Chairman, if you've been told that there's nothing there, why are you specifically investigating whether there are any links between the campaigns and Russian officials?
Unlike what I think what's been reported, we've had a long, ongoing investigation into Russian activities. I would have preferred for that not to be out and talked about in public, but you may remember for the last several years we've been concerned about Russia cyber activities, and we remain concerned about those activities. Since the election, we've broadened the scope of that investigation to include any involvement in our elections here, and of course any ties that there might be to any government officials at any level. So it's not just here in Washington, but governors and others. If there's anything out there, any American citizens from political campaigns coordinating with the Russian government, we clearly would want to know that, and we'd want to investigate it.
Just follow up. Have you seen the transcripts of Mike Nunes' phone calls with the Russian ambassador?
No, but I've been briefed on them, and it would be unusual, actually I think unprecedented for us to get transcripts that were illegally leaked out and discussed for us to have those here in Congress. And I think we've got to be very careful about the legislative branch of government getting FISA warranted communications and that we start combing through private conversations that American citizens are having, we got to be very careful where we go with this.
Concerning that you have learned from those briefings?
No, I think what it appears to me like is that it seems to be there's a difference between what Russia's sanctions are to people like myself, which when I think Russia sanctions, I think of dealing with Crimea, dealing with the invasion of Ukraine by the Russians, and the sanctions that we've put into place, working with our allies, with the EU and others. And then what happened right at the time after Christmas when President Obama kicked some Russian diplomats out, that I don't really consider that to be sanctions.
How extensive why the Gulf War, some kind of punitive action taken?
Well, look, Russia sanctions on the global stage, most of the meetings that I have with foreign leaders, they always revolve around, when we talk Russia sanctions, that's what we're normally referring to. I don't, when President Obama kicked out a few diplomats, that was, number one, it was way too late. Number two, it was extremely weak. And number three, the Russian government didn't even respond to it because it was so ridiculous.
When the White House asked you about, talking to this reporter, did you know that they had also asked Senator Burr to do the same thing, and did it feel to you as if it was some sort of a coordinated effort to push back?
No, I mean, if anything, it was the opposite. Many of you who were around 10 days ago, you know that I took your questions as it related to the New York Times piece as it related to 3 Americans and whether or not we had information or not. So I had already talked to many of you about that several times, both in press scrums and also on individual interviews. And so by the time, all it was a White House communications person passing a number and a name of a reporter over for me to, if I would talk to them, following up what I had already told all of you in the days before that. So I'm not sure how you generate a press story out of that, but I can't control what you guys write.
Did you know that they had asked Burr to
be clear on the FBI, are you saying the FBI has not supplied you with that evidence, or the FBI has told you there is no evidence?
Well, look, I'm not going to get into which agencies, okay? I think it's important. But the intelligence agencies have not provided me or the committee any information about those 3 Americans communicating with the Russians.
But they have not told you that evidence does not exist. There's a difference there.
Yeah, the way it sounds like to me is it's been looked into, and there's no evidence of anything there. Obviously, we'd like to know if there is. But then it's pretty serious. Then it would be the intelligence agencies then misleading Congress, which opens up a whole other problem.
Why not just name special prosecutor to take away the notion that this could be tainted by politics in any way?
Well, I mean, look, this is we're the legislative branch of government. We're elected. I think the history of special prosecutors is mixed, and at this point, what are we going to appoint a special prosecutor to do exactly? To chase stories of American citizens that end up in newspaper articles? I mean, that's right now. I mean, look, if there's at some point we have serious crimes that have been committed, it would be something that we would consider. But at this point, we don't have that. The only serious crimes we have are leaks that have come out of our government to the press and others. Yes.
You had written a letter to the FBI about the leaks. Can you give us an update on what you hope to get out?
Well, I wrote the letter, and obviously it's a classified letter, and there's classified version, unclassified version, and we're expecting answers to that. So I think we have some briefings this week and next week, and those briefings will continue.
And is your committee committing resources to investigating these leaks?
Well, as anything, we can't, it's just like I think it's very similar to us not having any evidence of who, of these American citizens that were allegedly talking to Russians. We also don't know exactly who would have known about General Flynn. Now, the good thing is about FISA and the way it works, there should be a record of who in the government knew about General Flynn talking to the Russian ambassador, and from there we should be able to know who's in the realm of the possible of who we would need to talk to.
On this point, can I ask you, who made the decision under the last administration administration to unmask Flynn, and was it appropriate?
We don't know yet, but that's a very good question, and those are some of the, I think that we should be able to find out. We should be able to find out who within the executive branch knew about the initial conversations, and then who went to who to get Flynn's name unmasked. So that should be a relatively small number of people.
So when the intelligence community begins presenting evidence to you, is that evidence going to be turned over to your committee, or is it going to be continue to be housed in the intelligence community?
Well, that will be, that's one of the contentious issues right now of where the information is housed. We'll probably have some here, some may remain at the agencies.
Have you heard any evidence at all, or seen anything about anyone in the White House directing Mr. Flynn to discuss the issue, any issues with the Russian ambassador? Did anyone in the White House tell him to do that?
No. Look, I think this whole issue with General Flynn is an American war hero, put together one of the greatest military machines in our history, providing the intelligence to basically eliminate Al-Qaeda from Iraq. And he was the National Security Advisor designee. He was taking multiple calls a day from ambassadors, from foreign leaders. And look, I know this because the foreign leaders were contacting me trying to get in touch with the transition team and folks that wanted to meet with President Trump or President-elect Trump and Vice President-elect Pence.
Did President-elect Trump at the time or the transition team tell Flynn to talk to the Russian ambassador?
I would find that hard to believe because they were so busy. I think these conversations were all very short. I know we had a... Yes,
yes, sir. Finalize and release the scope of the investigation. Also, do you plan to coordinate with the Senate side to have joint...
Yeah, we're separate bodies, but we will... so we'll have a scoping document that should be approved. I think it's finished now. And then probably just have some brief outlines of what we'll be looking at. But look, I mean, you guys all know what we're going to be looking at. It's not rocket science.
Coordinate interviews with the Senate so that you don't muck up the record.
I wouldn't. I wouldn't rule it out. I wouldn't rule it out. But we'll try to work with the Senate where possible. But I view this as two separate branches of the legislative branch of government. Yes.
Is there a difference between the White House asking you to call a reporter and asking the FBI to knock down particular stories?
Yeah, well, look, I don't think first of all, the White House talking to, having a reporter, if a reporter asks the White House, hey, can you get a hold of whatever member of Congress, I don't think there's any issue there. I don't know what the story's about. As it relates to the FBI, I believe what happened with the White House, as I understand it, in my limited conversations that I've had, I just think it was an obvious question that one would ask. If there's no evidence here, can you talk about it? And the FBI, of course, normally doesn't talk about leaks and whether or not they're investigating or other issues of who's under investigation. I think it's pretty standard for the FBI not to comment on this. It's pretty unusual if they do comment. And so, obviously so I don't even know how true that story is. I mean, I would go to the White House and ask, what conversations actually occurred, but I don't think very many, and I think they were pretty simple.
Is there just an idea of how far along you are in starting this investigation? And
just to make sure you understand, what caused me to go out a year ago and say the biggest intelligence failure since 9/11 was our failure to understand Putin's plans and intentions. What caused that is because we were constantly investigating the Russia problems. So all we're doing is we're adding additional things that we're looking at, which will include the election issues.
You say that there's no evidence right now of Russian contacts with campaign officials, but you also say that you're just in the scope gathering process of the investigation.
Well, we're putting together a scope, working bipartisan with my counterpart, Mr. Schiff, so that we make sure that we're on the election as it relates to the election. But look, we've always been very, very interested in what the Russians are up to. So this is basically part of an ongoing investigation that I was hopeful would have never been out in the press like it is, but now it is. And now we're just expanding the scope of the investigation to include what we will look at as it relates to the election. But in terms of evidence, some we have, some evidence we do have. Obviously, we're looking for more evidence, but most importantly, as it relates to American citizens, if you all have American citizens that were talking to Russian agents, If you want to come to our committee, be a whistleblower yourselves, and bring me those names, I'd be very interested in having them.
But you expect to obtain more evidence or information, I should say, as the weeks go on.
Yeah, we will continue to take evidence. We'll follow the facts where they lead.
How extensive was the Obama administration's wiretapping of the transition team and the campaign? Was it just Flynn, or do you think this was a regular process of listening into what Trump was doing?
Well, as I understand it, this was inadvertent collection to where then Mr. Flynn's name was then unmasked. Someone had to make that decision. Somebody very high up within the government would have had to do that, or multiple people. And we're very interested in figuring out who those people were, because they have questions to answer as to why, what laws did they use to decide to unmask General Flynn's name.
So to follow up with that, if there was ongoing contact between the Russians and the Trump campaign, wouldn't other names pop up inadvertently? And so if this was the only incident that popped up, would that knock down the idea that there was regular contact?
Yeah, look, there is no evidence that I've been presented of regular contact with anybody within the Trump campaign. The only one that's obvious is General Flynn's discussions with the Russians, which I would still contend that he was doing what he was supposed to do, which is prepare the president-elect for office by getting as many leaders in front of him as possible.
It's a major crime, if I could ask. It's a major crime for leakers to discuss classified information relating to these communications and elsewhere. Why is it not inappropriate for the White House and you and Senator Burr to call reporters and give your own interpretation of, again, a continuing investigation that involves classified? Isn't that a counter leak, as it were? You're still discussing.
Well, I would never. Well, I would never talk about classified information with any of you, because that would be a crime.
But the message that was coming from you and others was that we've looked at the information, there's nothing there, and that relates to an ongoing investigation. It's based on, at its core, classified information about contacts between.
Right, but there was no release of classified information in that, and I'm a little confused by your question, because the White House has been very critical of a lot of you, and so here you have the White House actually trying to communicate with many of you, and trying to communicate with the Congress about what they're doing, and now suddenly that's wrong. There's nothing wrong with that. If you look at the last administration, and I think if a lot of the Democrats were being honest with you, they know that the relationship between the last White House and Congress was extremely poor. What we're trying to do is have a very good working relationship with the executive branch of government at all levels. And so I would anticipate that and hope that we have more coordination with the White House and all the appropriate agencies, and that we actually, on one side, we're a separate branch of government, and we will conduct rigorous oversight, which, look, I've been very clear. If I find out that Reince Priebus was talking to Russian agents, you can bet that Reince Priebus will get a subpoena and will appear before the Congress.
Mr. Chairman, Jim Comey, the FBI director, was on the Senate side right before the recess. Tom Cotton called it a hearing. Has he appeared before your committee in a similar capacity? Have you asked for him to come?
Yeah, we've had discussions with the FBI director and others within the FBI, and I do expect that they will be briefing us again either this week or next.
Are you going to?
Yes, sir, back there. What's that?
Disagree with calls for the Attorney General to recuse himself?
That's way above my pay grade. I have no idea. I don't even know what at this point would the Attorney General.
Well, there's
what would he recuse himself from?
They're calling him to, because of his relationship with the Trump campaign, that he would be an impartial.
Right, but the way this works is, if the FBI is at some point, if they're conducting an investigation, they would have to go to the appropriate authorities to get a warrant to do something, and as far as I know, none of that's happened.
Speaking of Reince Priebus, do you have any concerns with him talking with the FBI, the number 2 at the FBI, to bat down stories about this, given the clear restrictions between discussing?
Look, I think you need to ask them, but I think they've been pretty clear about the discussions. I think the FBI regularly briefs both branches of government. So FBI would brief the President, Vice President, the Chief of Staff, any other appropriate personnel. the same way that they brief the Senate and the House. And so it would not be unusual in any of those cases for us to make requests of the FBI or any other intelligence agency.
Based on your briefings, has anything in the Trump dossier been verified?
Not that I'm aware of.
Going back to what the White House was telling you earlier, you said that it was not about knocking down the New York Times report. So what did they suggest you say?
I think that's a good point. And look, you guys are the ones that were there. Matter of fact, I think you were there when I think I spoke to you the morning of that story breaking. I was very clear with all of you about what I thought about that New York Times story. This was way in advance of the White House sending me one phone number, and I still don't understand what would be the problem of the White House sending me a number of a press person to call. Isn't the whole point of the press to be transparent? I mean, you guys always normally want to talk to me, and that's why I wanted to create this press availability today so that I can talk to all of you, so that it's just more organized versus you guys chasing me around in press scrums.
What was the guidance from the White House? Did they give you any guidance on this?
No. It was just this person wants to talk about the New York Times story, and then I got the number and I called the reporter.
Mr. Chairman, on the Flynn phone call, I'm not sure I fully understand the distinction you made between the Ukraine sanctions and the sanctions that President Obama imposed. It wasn't just kicking out diplomats.
So look, I think let me describe it bluntly.
But
okay?
he also did sanction individuals with the GRU, contractors that participated in the hacking. And I guess the question is, if General Flynn telegraphed to the Russian ambassador that those sanctions, whether or not you think they were serious enough or strong enough, would be eased or lifted, would that not be concerning?
So let me be very, very clear. So I think that just when I apply common sense to this, those were not sanctions. Those were petty. They're not taken seriously by anybody who knows this. When every conversation I've ever had about Russia sanctions with any of our allies, it's always been about the Russia sanctions dealing with the invasion of Ukraine.
But you realize there were sanctions imposed.
Well, look, you guys can call them that if you want, but I wouldn't call them that.
That's what they were called by the White House. But the question is, did General Flynn in any way suggest to the Russian ambassador that he didn't have to worry, that Vladimir Putin didn't have to worry about these sanctions because President Trump would either ease or lift them?
Yeah, well, I think if the discussions occurred around ensuring that there was no overreaction by the Russian government, so that the new administration could do like all the other previous administrations who think that they can work with Putin, which all three have been wrong, that they cannot work with Putin. If that was what General Flynn did, was just to try to keep the lines of communications open and to make sure the Russians didn't overreact and maybe have some reciprocal attacks on our diplomats or other embassies around the world, that did us a big favor, and we should be thanking him, not going after him.
It sound like he was telling the Russian ambassador, "Don't worry about what the president just announced. We're going to do something different when we get."
Yeah, I don't know that that's what was said, but if that was said, I don't know what the problem would be with that. I mean, I think that's exactly what he should be doing.
Isn't that one U.S. administration negotiating with
Logan-Act? You're a Logan-Act guy?
I didn't mention the Logan-Act. I'm just saying if one administration...
Look, it's ridiculous. If the Logan-Act's ridiculous, you guys all know that's ridiculous.
So do you plan to subpoena Trump's tax returns?
To do what with?
To subpoena Trump's tax returns?
No, we're not going to do that.
A moment ago, when answering his question about Jeff Sessions, whether he should recuse himself, you said, well, if I understood correctly, you said, well, I don't know why he should, because you didn't know of any investigation going on. So is that saying...
Well, I don't think there's any evidence to go after anyone at this point, is my point. At that point, it'd be up to the Attorney General and others.
Is the FBI not investigating leaks, at least?
I would assume the FBI should always be investigating leaks. I would hope that they're taking the leaks that have occurred over the course of the last couple of months very seriously, and I would hope they're investigating. But look, they're not going to comment on those, nor should they.
And one other thing. If you're looking into leaks, is that rolled into the Russian investigation, or is that something separate?
No, it'll all be rolled into the investigation. Any other new questions?
Your Democratic colleagues are not here at this briefing today. We understand they were not aware this was happening. Why should Americans be confident that this inquiry you're doing is in fact bipartisan?
Well, the whole point of me calling this this press availability was because I didn't want to have, like we had the last week, where there were multiple press scrums. So I often had times had to continue to repeat myself. And then, as I saw these stories roll out, I just looked at all this and said, well, this can't possibly be true, because I was very open, very transparent with all of you. I was willing to go on the record right away about what had happened or not happened with the New York Times story, what I knew at the time. And so I just want to make sure that what I'm trying to do to bring to this is actually more transparency, so that we can have a normal engagement with all of you that's regularly scheduled in advance. For two reasons. One, so it's all on the record, so you all know that we're being transparent. But two, I don't like to have to repeat myself all week on the same thing.
Mr. Chairman, another country. All right, you're listening right there to the chairman of the House Intel Committee offering a lot of really important and interesting information coming out about the committee's ongoing investigation into Russian involvement in the U.S. election. Of course, most recently, reports of, including CNN reports, of Trump campaign advisors having contact with Russians known to U.S. intelligence. A couple important points here that Devin Nunes just now said that he has been provided no evidence that any Trump advisors speaking to Russians. He also said that we can't just go on witch hunts just because people have turned up in news stories. What does that mean for what we still consider an ongoing investigation by that committee into Russian meddling in the election? That's clearly a key question, taking a lot of questions and offering some serious pushback on new reports that the White House coordinated with the chairman and as well the CIA director, Mike Pompeo, in order to push back to knock down stories.